for myself, I had to begin to practice praying and seeking God for what he was going to do and what he was doing. And I had to choose wisdom that I've learned in the past. Don't act like you know anything. It's always best to know you know less than everybody else so you can learn. I learned years ago, if somebody tells me a story, and if they go to tell me that story again, let them tell you the story again. Why? Because a wise person knows that that third go around, this person may share something that they didn't the first time. And so I've learned to do that. Well, I've also had to recognize it was one thing, you know, when the mask started becoming popular and these different things were going on, but I was at a loss because here I was thinking that I was up on things. And because I had read for years and read so many books and understood what was going on, I thought I was ready and prepared. And I'll never forget, I was talking to Deborah and David. And while we were talking, I was telling them, I said, you guys know where we are. And I said, I've seen this movie before. And right then and there, wisdom rebuked me. Wisdom rebuked me because wisdom said, hey, listen, you've never seen this. You've only seen the movie trailer. You didn't even see the movie. I just gave you a glimpse of what it was to come. And once I realized I didn't know anything anymore, which I already knew I didn't, but I really had to know. And God says, you prepared for one thing, but I'm preparing you and everyone else for something else. And so I had to make a decision. What was I going to do? I told a brother yesterday, I said, I had to pray. I said, because I could come up with creative ways to have services and keep the air circulating and everything. Excuse me, but I heard wisdom say, don't you do anything. I wanted to just jump into my car and just go to the store. And I said, no, I don't know what's going on. And so before they even started the self-quarantine, I had to go ahead and quarantine myself, off from my family and from everyone, and just stay in the house because I realized that here I was, a type A personality. And my way of breaking the monotony is to take a ride and go do something. And wisdom said, no, you don't know anything. All you know is what's happening right now. Now become present. And after a while, I stopped having conversations with people, not because I needed to hear from God. I didn't need to hear someone's research. I needed to hear, God, what are you saying for me, for my family, for those that I am influential over, that I'm able to influence their lives? What are you saying to me? And I'm going to talk today, I'm talking about making grief made plain, because like many of you, I had plans. And it was now my turn. I had just performed a abbreviated version of this new production I was writing. I had written called Stigleaf Mata. and how I was able to reverse some things in my life with natural food products. And so I was ready to roll. And like many of you, the brakes were slammed. And all of a sudden, here I was. I spent all this time, this energy, invested all this money in all these different things, and it was over. It was done. And immediately, I had to say, all right, God, you've changed directions. See, but I know through wisdom, the work of God requires major adjustments. It requires you to make many adjustments, and to make them not haphazardly, but immediately, and with a spirit of cooperation and joy. And here I was recognizing I have to make more adjustments now. And so what I learned, although my wife wrote the book, Good Grief, and I went back to reread it again, and I am just utterly amazed at what she was able to write. And if you knew what it took her to go through to even produce that book, she had to face darkness, because she said, I want to write something that feels like I'm having a conversation, and it is conversational. And so when I went back to reread it for myself this time, I didn't know that I would be so blessed by it. And she had asked probably about a few months back, I don't know which one to do. Good Grief, or she did something else. I can't remember what it was. But I told her, I said, I believe that Good Grief is the one you should do. Having I knew, I said, it's going to be helpful to people. But I didn't know that eventually I would begin to read headlines about people being anxious, people being anxiety ridden, COVID, psychoanalysis, or COVID mental illness, and being in the house on lockdown and what it does for you. I had no idea that that was going to happen. And so that's why I went to her Be Free 365, and I took the course on grief myself, and I'll do it again because it opened up to me. Now, let me bring it home to you so that you understand. Grief is about loss. And grief is about losing something you thought you had. Grief is about losing someone or something that you relied upon. And grief is having to be caught off guard sometimes by life. And with grief comes loss. Excuse me. And because I am a creative person, and I have followed the winds of creativity through my creator, I knew I had something that was big. And after I did it one time, the way I wanted to do it, with a set and everything, it was over. It was like, you can't do it anymore. People are not going to meet in rooms. And I had to experience loss of my vision, loss of my plans, loss of money that I had put in. And it sent me someplace emotionally. And in it sending me someplace emotionally, I knew, all right, you're going to overcome this. And I've learned over the years that if you're going to overcome something, you must dive deep into it. You must be able to read it in such a fashion where you immerse yourself into the subject, because what you're attempting to do is master and learn what you have not been acquainted with. And so after going through doing my presentation at Johns Hopkins and thinking, okay, this is going to be it, I had no idea the next week we'd be on lockdown. And I had to deal with the loss. And I said, if I can overcome fear, because the way I was able to overcome fear, and it doesn't mean that fear doesn't come my way, but the way I was able to overcome it, I immersed myself with it. And there was an article I read in the Rolling Stones magazine about the boss. I can't think of the white boy's name. I can't think of his name, but he sings all of the songs. He said, he put in the Rolling Stones that article, he says, I have ADHD and I also have voices. Bruce, thank you, Bruce Springsteen. I also have voices. And he said, those voices, he says, when I get into the car, they all get into the car with me. And he says, I just got to make sure I'm the one that's driving. And that article so let me know that I was not by myself, that there were others. And if this person, Bruce Springsteen, who has written songs and changed the world, who was still saying, when I get into the car, I got four other people that get into the car with me, but I have to make sure I'm the one that's driving. And that made me begin to research even more depression, even more fear, and really try to understand it, because I understood that you can take captive a thought and make it obedient to the anointing, obedient to your creator. And I said, I'm not going to be mastered by this fear. So I overcame it as far as I was concerned, and I thought I had made it through, and I did. But then what happens? COVID-19 shows up, and I say, well, God, I've already dealt with this. I've dealt with this fear. I've dealt with death. And he says, yeah, but I want you to become acquainted with fear. Fear became my friend. It was no longer my counselor. I got to know fear. And when I say I got to know fear, instead of running when fear showed up, I let fear come and stand right next to me. And I would listen to, what is fear saying? Why? Because I understood I was experiencing loss. And I said, if I'm 50, at that point I was 52. And I said, if I'm 52, I can't live the rest of my life on this earth in any amount of fear. And that's when I saw fear was in so many other areas of my life. So with what I've experienced on my journey, my goal this evening will be able to add value to your life, add significance to your life, help you and give you some tools and some things that'll help you or someone you know that is going through grief. And it is now, many of us, we are now experiencing grief, but I told my wife, I said, I want to do this because I want to make it plain. I want to make grief as plain and grief and mourning as plain as possible, because at one point or another, we're all doing it. I saw a testimonial of a woman who said she had lost all this weight, and then she found herself trapped in the house. And she said, here I am, a private eater. I eat in secret. And now here I was left to myself. And she said, all those habits started coming back because she said, I couldn't deal with what I was experiencing. And so grief, my friends, is about loss. And it is your response to loss. Your response to loss. And when I say that, let me just read this right here. Sometimes in grief, you have to grieve the life you thought you were going to have. For example, you were going to be together forever, or you were going to get this business started. We must in time let go of the pictures of life we thought we were going to live, and accept the different one in front of us. I learned right away when he says, behold, I do a new thing. And that is, take the wishful thinking pictures or the magical thinking pictures out of your purview. And now look at reality as it is in front of you right now. And so when we deal with grief, I've been dealing with the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. And if we can bring that wave up, and it has all of them, all 5 of them on there. Thank you. Jill and I, we've talked about this, but I want to take more time again to go through it with you so that you know what you're up against. And it starts with denial, and then it goes down to anger, and then it goes down to depression, and then it starts making an upswing to bargaining and acceptance. And once you see these 5 stages, you begin to understand something's going on. Now, I have a slide. I don't know if I sent it to you all. I sent a slide to Joanne of this PowerPoint keynote, because I'd like to go to slide number 2, if you have it. There you go, my man. The 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, are part of life jewels given to us on our journeys. Bring that down, please. I want you to hear, and I'm going to come back to that. We have to take the mystery out of grief. We've got to take the mystery out of pain and fear. And we've got to see them for what they are. And these stages, they are actual jewels given to us on our journeys. Bring that slide back up. I was challenged, see these as natural emotions that serve as a framework to keep you learning, keep up our learning to live with the one or with what we lost. Live without one, with the one or without one, or what we've lost. In other words, when we go through these emotions, a part of life is lost, my friends. And the day you understand that each stage is a tool, over time you end up with a toolbox. Bring it back to me for a second, please. Over time, and thank you so much. Over time, when you stop running from your emotions, when you stop running from anger, and you stop running from depression and running from bargaining, but you make a decision, I'm going to accept But you got to make that decision while you are experiencing anger, experiencing depression, experiencing bargaining. God, what if I had only, if this could have taken place? You fail to understand that this bargaining or these jewels that have been given to us, they are over time become the very things we need to get through in life. Anyone who skips a certain stage of life, you're going to still face this. You're going to still go through these things. Go to the next side where it says they are tools to help us, or I put me, reframe. And that is slide number 3. They are tools to help me. They are tools to help me reframe my experience, frame the identity, what may be, and identify what I may be feeling. They are not stops on a linear timeline in grief. Bring it back to me and I'll go back, bring it back to me. I want you to understand that we see those things on that cycle where it starts off with acceptance. It starts off with denial, then it goes to anger, then it goes to depression, then it goes to bargaining, and then it goes to acceptance. I have to understand that these are not linear, meaning they don't go 1, 2, 3, 4. You just don't go through these cycles in a linear fashion. Sometimes some people are in one space and they don't get around to the other space until they complete this space. When I began to study Kubler and her writing, because she was one of the first to introduce the 5 stages of grief, she also explained, and if you remember, I did something with Frazier, and it's called Good Grief, or The Good Son, and it's about him going through grief. And she said, and they used her information. She says, I like the show. I thought it was great. She said, but I did not want people to think that this is what you must go through. Some people don't go through some of these things, or they go through one stage of these. And so when I say these are not linear timeline, you don't know. This is why it pays to be present. Everyone does not go through these stages in a prescribed or the same order. Let me give you an example. Denial. And if you bring that up, and we've talked about denial, she said that denial was about avoidance, and that's slide number 4. Denial was about avoidance, confusion, elation, shock, and fear. And so there are a lot of us, we say, oh, I'm in denial, or I feel, or she's in denial, but let's just break it down to its pure essence. What is it? It's avoiding something that you need to face. You can bring it back to me. It's confusion. It is you not understanding what you're experiencing. Then denial is also elation. I call it getting high, because some people, the way they get past their problem is to get themselves emotionally on a high wavelength or conscious level to overcome what they're experiencing. But it's elation. It's not actually revelation. It is me using my emotions to get past this. Shock and fear. And so when you are in denial and you go through avoidance and you go through shock and you go through confusion, you go through elation, or you go through fear, there are many choices that many of us want to make once we go through this. But now I want you to understand that, and I'm looking at my notes here, give me a second here. In the first stage of grieving, denial helps me survive the loss. I'll say it again. Denial helps me to survive the loss. Denial is something like the system within your body that if you get hurt, you will go into a level of the shock where your body will release natural hormones and endorphins to help you deal with the pain. Well, denial helps me to survive the loss. It's the examples, and I put examples, the world becomes meaningless and overwhelming. And so once I went into the stage of denial on different occasions in my life, it was because I was feeling overwhelmed. Life makes, when you are in denial, life makes no sense. And when you're in a state of shock and denial, we go numb and we wonder, how can we go on? I began to ask God. One of the major losses that took place in my life was in 2017 when I tried to return to the pulpit, and I tried to get up and teach the way I used to teach, and I couldn't put things together. And I could see people's faces looking at me, but I was going to give it my best shot. And I gave it my best shot. But it was serious loss because after that service, they told me, you need, Pastor, you need to go home. That had never happened before. And that meant, I said, well, God, how will I ever get, this is what I do for a living. This is what I do for my call. This is what I do with my vision. What should I do? And that's when God said, you're going to have to trust me. And that's when I knew I was in a fight. And once I knew I was in a fight, I needed to be healed. And I began to grieve that person that I lost. I began to grieve the old Deron because I realized, Deron, you're not the man you used to be. And so now, this is the season when the questions of how and why become preeminent in your life. Right now, many of us, we were doing good until we hit this season of shutdown, this season of lockdown, this season of pandemic, this season of now I've got to homeschool, this season of God, help me find a babysitter, this season of I was having just enough money to make it. Now I'm not getting anything. Once you start going through that, there's nothing wrong with asking how, and why. Because when you begin to ask those questions, the why, this is how you turn inward. This is your turn inward where you begin to say, you know what? I got to find an answer. And oftentimes I thought I could find the answer by going to get some food or something. No, I have to turn within. I had to increase my meditation. I had to increase, like this right here. These cards are for me. They're not for you. I'm just letting you hear what I'm doing for myself. And so I have another card here that says understanding grief. And understanding grief. Grief is a time of reimagining, renewal, rebuilding. Do a small thing new today and experience a food, a new music, an outfit, a new outfit. Be open to something new today. And so when I read this card today, I have to choose, do something. If you're going to get out of depression, it's going to require an action. It's going to require that you do something new and that you don't give in to Eeyore, the depression, and that whole depression of him just constantly being where he is. Listen, as you accept reality of the loss as it is, it it is, let me try to, as you accept the reality of the loss as it is, you realize you have unknowingly begun the healing part of your journey. Let me try that in a better way. The moment I accept it, you're going to have to ask for help, Deron. You're going to have to be vulnerable. You're going to have to ask someone to pick that up for you. You're going to, there was a few times that you're going to have to put your arm around somebody while you're walking. You're going to have to accept people looking at you like, poor man. But you also, when you do that, you're also beginning, I was beginning my road to healing. You don't realize how much you are into people pleasing until you have to ride in a wheelchair in the airport. And you've not been someone who has ever had to ride in a wheelchair. And you've now got to wait, and you've got to be assisted, and now everyone, and this is for anyone in a wheelchair, you know what I'm talking about. But for me, it was a new experience because now I'm looking up at everybody looking at me. And I so badly want to say, hey, listen, I have to do this and that. And God says, no, acknowledge you need help right now. And there's nothing wrong in this season that, okay, you've lost your mobility and you can no longer jog through the airport like you did before. But you are still you. You're still here and God is still with me. And so when I say you are on your way or your journey to healing, for this questioning is the process of healing. When you're asking questions, you're beginning to turn inward because you're on the process of healing. My wife taught me years ago, feelings don't disappear. You can bury them, but they're going to show back up. Unless you face your fears, unless you put what you're going through to death, they don't disappear, they resurface. And when they resurface, they become stronger. Now, I know some of you all have a problem with Papa John's and whatever the case may be, but they got some bad, meaning good, TV commercials. And when they began to advertise the Papadillas, I knew that was either going to be a trigger to take me back down the road I used to be, or I was going to have to acknowledge I am feeling tempted right now, and acknowledge right now I'm thinking about getting that food because it's going to take me past what I'm feeling right now. And I chose not to do it. And I'm not telling you that that was easy. The fact that I can still remember what it is. But I had to make a decision when it came to certain cheese and just, dairy and that kind of stuff, to say, I want to give myself the best shot. And so I was able to deal with that. Let me go back to my presentation, please. Oh, good. Please go to slide number 5. Because whenever we talk about grieving, the focus is often on the person who's experiencing the trial. And I'll just read the slide I wrote. When we think about grieving, we often focus on the person who is experiencing the actual trial. Yet it is often the one who's going through the anticipatory loss of a loved one or a way of life they became accustomed to. The caretakers, you can bring it back here, please. The caretakers, the people who have to jump in and now take care of somebody, they too begin to go through anticipatory loss. They begin to anticipate a loss on its way. If the loved one in their life is terminally ill, or if they're going through, they begin to say, what is my life going to look like if this and thus happens? And so I had to learn with my wife, my friends, and those who love me. They were grieving too. And they went through an anticipatory loss, thinking, what could we do? And that's when I said, Deron, this is why you have to stay strong, man. You've got to keep your spirit up, because people don't know what you're going through. And they want to help you, but they can't, because this one is what you're going through. And so that made me angry. Go to the anger slide. There was a time, and I confessed it, it's slide number 6. I confessed it. My wife, she asked me, did you drop something downstairs? And I said, yeah, I dropped something. I lied. I dropped something. Why? Because I was frustrated. I was irritated. Bring it here. Part of grieving, part of grieving is being able to tell yourself you're angry. Because I could not get because of the medication and the stuff I was on, I couldn't get my hands to do what my mind was saying to do. Or I couldn't get the words to come out of my mouth that I wanted to say, and I was saying something else. And at some point, I remember taking one of the chairs that I had in my room and slamming it on another piece of plastic and breaking the piece of plastic thing that was on the ground. Why? Because I was extremely angry. And I was frustrated. I was irritated. I was irritated that I couldn't just get up and go where I wanted to go. I was irritated that I had keys to drive, but I couldn't go driving. Why? Because I didn't want to total my wife's car, because I had already done it once. And I told a friend, I said, I hate this. This is why I went to counseling, and I had to ask the counselor, is it all right to say that I hate this, because I thought I was failing God? To acknowledge that I hated the path that I was on. And that's when I had to learn to deal with this anger. And that's when I called my loved one. And I told him, I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm irritated. I'm anxious. And I had to sit with each one of these emotions, and these are emotions that we all go through. I had to sit through each one of them and think to myself, what are you going to do, brother? You're going to have to let this go. And that's when God reminded me, keep your space pure. That's why I stopped having a lot of conversations on the phone, because by this time people were expecting me to still be the man that I was. And I didn't have anything to give them but who I was at that moment. And because of anger, irritation, and anxiety, I was grumpy. I was short with people I loved. And God had to help me. He had to help me. Now, one of the things, the reason I wanted to say what I said to you, because if we go to slide number 7, it's important to remember that anger surfaces once you're feeling safe enough to know you will probably survive whatever comes. Bring that down. I'm going to read this. It's important to remember that anger surfaces once you are feeling safe enough to know you will probably survive whatever comes. I had to see anger as a tool, and that it is important to remember that anger surfaces once you are feeling safe enough to know that you will survive whatever comes your way. Instead of allowing fear to be my comforter and anger to be my guide, I had to choose to say, all right, anger is a God-given emotion, and it is a warning that something else is going on. Now be still, Deron, and find out, why are you angry? Why are you angry? And you see me bite my lip because I had to come to the conclusion, I'm angry because I spent a long time getting myself together to handle tough seasons. And now I gotta get rides. I gotta ask my wife to go pick something up for me. I've lost some of the happy-go-lucky I used to be. And that's when God says, but you've also gained insight. And I had to put it to death, you guys. Go to slide number 8. Anger is a necessary stage of the healing process. Anger is a necessary stage of the healing process. You may be grieving, but you must understand, do not act out in your anger, but be willing to feel your anger, even though it may seem endless. You may truly feel it, and the more it will begin to, the more you feel it, the more it will dissipate. You can bring that down. The day I acknowledged that I was angry and frustrated and being short with my wife and not wanting to have a conversation is the day I began my process of healing. Because God was saying, don't you run from who you are and what's inside of you. And I didn't. And I'll never forget, Jill said, I don't know who you are. And I said, I don't know who I am now, myself. Well, I can tell you this. I know a lot more who I am than I did a year ago. Let's go to one more slide, depression. Depression is when you're overwhelmed, you feel helpless, and if you're not careful, you become hostile, flight and fight. Once I heard Michelle Obama said that she had low-level depression. I said, okay, I'm in good company. I never compare myself to Obama. I said, but she married to Obama, and they was in the White House, and she feeling low-level depression, and we all go through it. And I was so glad that she was honest with that, because I had been talking about depression. And that's when I realized, oh no, we're all going through something where we are overwhelmed by so many different adjustments that we have to make. I had to decide I refuse to be depressed. And when I say I refuse to be depressed, depressing thoughts can come through my head and leave. But I'm going to remind myself of who I am in my Creator. And I understand that depression is really grief, depression, and all that. It's a tool. It's a tool to help you master your emotions. And I'll never forget, I went out to dinner with my daughter and my wife. And I knew I said, I'm not going to be in a good mood when I get to this place. And I said, that's not true. You are going to go to this restaurant with your wife and your daughter, and you're going to have a great time. I can do all things through God who strengthens me. And we went and we had a wonderful time. That was the first time I had even been down to the wharf in several years. But I chose not to be depressed. I said, no, I'm going to be here. And that's what I'm going to do. And then I have been vulnerable and admitted to a couple of different people, hey, I'm feeling depressed. And went to counseling, and I'm happy to say it comes in waves, but I refuse to be defeated by some invisible pain. Church, that's about the best that I can give you tonight. I asked Wisdom, Wisdom asked me, what would you be doing if y'all was meeting in the building? I'd be talking just like this and saying, hey, you're not by yourself. And not being able to go to sleep, not being able to exercise, not being able to carry out certain things because so many adjustments have had to be made. It's a part of the healing process. My prayer is that something was said that will get you to the point of acceptance. And acceptance is moving on, exploring plans to move on, but moving forward. The best I can do, I thank you for listening, and I want to say a prayer for you. And I pray that you're able to get up naturally. Father, right now, I thank you for whatever words that were shared. God, I thank you for clarity. I thank you for memory. And I thank you, Lord, for giving me the ability to speak your word unadulterated. God, I thank you for energy, health in my body and the health in my wife's body, my family and my friend. God, I thank you for protecting us all. Now, Father, please help us deal with these different things that we're going through, and let us know we're not by ourselves, and we can and will survive this season as well. Now, God, I pray for the mother who is nervous about school. Father, give her peace of mind tonight. Give the father peace of mind tonight. They don't want to send them. Some of them don't want to send their kids back to school. And they've got to make choices between kids and paying rent. God, I ask that you would supernaturally show up to people under the sound of my voice, that you would give them a way out. God, I pray for this country. I pray for this country, God. God, I pray. Bring some new energy into this space and this place. And God, I ask that you would bless a school teacher who is afraid to go back to school because of the rules. Give her strength, Father. Give him strength, Father. Father, bless the doctors, the nurses, the delivery people, the cashiers, those who have to disinfect, the wheelchair providers. Bless them all, God. Father, bless the family with food. Father, let them open their mouths. And Father, I ask that you would pour out the floodgates of blessings, and that we would see you during this time. God, I thank you for this opportunity. And once again, I thank you for your supernatural blessing. In the precious name of Yeshua, Jesus. Amen.